Share your screen.
Smiles, everyone.
All right. I'm hitting the button and then sharing.
Wouldn't want to give away the API keys.
None of that's on there. Wouldn't be the first time.
Hello and welcome to Live Coding Happy Hour, your weekly catastrophic IT failure session. All right, we're a few minutes late. We're having some YouTube problems, which looks to be entirely my user error. So I'm going to take the hit on that one. I am Dave Slusher. With me are Chuck Tomasi and Josh Nerius. And step one of this whole thing, welcome back, Chuck. The prodigal son has returned.
It's good to be back. It feels like it's been like a year. It's crazy how long.
At least it's been a quarter and a half. Something
I'm thinking 3-4 months. It's been so long my liver has recovered. So let's fix that right away.
All right. And so up top, we're going to continue where we were last week with the Office 365 integration. Now, we got a lot of disclaiming to do on this one, which is that we're quickly getting out of comfort zone. We're getting into kind of weird stuff. So we got to renew the disclaimer. Not only that things may not work, but we may hit blind alleys extremely early comparatively, to most weeks. So we're going to do O365, and then we've got some orchestration stuff. We, at any point, may bail on the Office 365 if it turns out to be non-productive. So we have kind of a threshold of frustration that if we exceed that, we're just going to switch topics. So that said, all right, gentlemen. Let's go around the horn, starting with Chuck, the longest since he's been here, and give the slightly longer bios.
The longer bio, my bio has slightly changed since the last time I was on here. I am no longer with the platform practice team. I had a nice short title before platform architect. Now I have a much longer one that I think we need to extend the width on the sysuser.title field. It is Senior Technical Product Marketing Manager, now platform. What that means is I'm working for the marketing people, for the platform, and I'm going to be putting out technical content for you, customers and partners and employees, everybody. My first focus is on a lot of the best practices. You may go, well, Chuck, we already have the technical best practices documented. These are newer, different ones like, hey, how do I extend an out-of-the-box global application using a scope? Popular questions like that are on my radar right now.
Cool.
All right. And Josh?
And I'm Josh Nerius, developer evangelist. My title has not changed. It's nice and short. Although, maybe we're thinking about renaming ourselves, but that's something else. But anyway, here in the developer program, working with Dave, and I think if you've watched any of these, you already know who I am. We need a little bit more of a reminder of who this Chuck guy is. Well, maybe not. But
the guy with the tie.
Yep. So that's me. And I'm very unprepared for today. Like this is going to be an interesting session. I'm not exactly unprepared, but I'm unprepared. Well, I'll explain.
You're underprepared.
I'll explain. Yeah. Underprepared, something like that. Anyway. All right.
And I'm Dave Slusher. Also, I'm going to just do it. I'm developer advocate for ServiceNow.
Oh. He's put the tape over his name badge. You can just see that. I'm developer advocate the same way I'm developer advocate, which is I just started calling myself that. I'm not actually listed. That's not my actual formal title. So it is out in the world that actually there's a distinction, and evangelists tend to be more marketing and advocates tend to do more what we're doing. So that's it. I just royal fiat from me. I'm a developer advocate with the platform team here at ServiceNow. All right. So let's go forward. From that, I almost forgot something extremely important. The beers. The beers.
The bears.
All right.
Oh,
Chuck, what's your beer?
I have a Rogue Dead Guy Ale, which has been sitting in the fridge for quite some time.
Yeah, that's last week. I had a beer that was at least a year old. It was not optimal conditions.
I recall enjoying this very much, so we'll see if it still lives up.
All right, Josh.
And I have a Miskatonic Hacktoberfest. It's a Scotch-style ale in the Marsden tradition, is what it says.
Good timing. Oktoberfest time of year.
It is that time.
And just today, I got one of those mixed 12 packs of Sam Adams, like fall, the fall blend, whatever you call it, the assortment. And even though it's 90 degrees here today, I got that. And I said I'm going to get whatever random one. I just reached in the fridge and got one. And if I got the regular Boston Lager, I would put it back. And anything else, I would just take it. And so I got the pumpkin-y, whatever it's called, 20 pounds of pumpkin, which it's a little early for a pumpkin beer, but I'm having it anyway. And welcome back, old friend. All right. With that, let's start on the O365 stuff.
Sounds good. So picking up where we left off last week, actually, we stopped with a date issue. And I did want to look at that briefly to see if we could actually figure out what it was, because I think we thought it was a date issue, but I don't think it was actually a date issue. It was a little bit weirder than that. There was some kind of a native object is not accepted or is not allowed in scoped application or something. So I'm going to look at that and see if we can close that loop, just so that we don't have loose ends there. And then the other thing we're going to do is we're going to start looking at, this is where things get a little weird and a little bit interesting, is Azure AD and orchestration. So we've never really talked about orchestration at all on LCHH. It's an area that I haven't touched. I've built tons and tons of integrations and apps, and I've never really done anything with orchestration.
And according to our survey, it's widely popular.
It is very popular. So there's a lot of interest in it. And then I think the interesting thing about this is because we are new to it, it gives us an interesting opportunity to really experience what somebody else who's trying to figure it out is probably going to experience as well. So,
well, that's very much like our approach was to Service Portal and automated testing framework, right? Which is, in both of those cases, I went out of my way to not learn too much before we started, so that we were having roughly the same experience on air that we were having, that we expect any developer to have. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it feels very much like a return to form in some ways in what we're doing today. So I'm happy about that. Where things get a little weird is because this is an integration with Azure, and I didn't have any Azure AD directories or whatever you want to call these things set up and ready to go. I had to try to get that set up by myself. And it's one thing to integrate with something that's already there. It's another thing to then figure out how the thing works and get it stood up and then try to integrate with it. So it's out there. It's just a question of if we're going to have much success doing what we think we are. And so that's where if it looks like we're not going to get much useful information, we'll pivot and we'll work on something else in orchestration. But we think there's a lot of interest in some of the Azure stuff.
Sounds like my experience when I first started setting up service mapping. Oh, go stand up an Exchange stack. I was never an Exchange administrator.
I would not know how to do that. So this as Azure AD, is this your own one that's out on a VM somewhere, or where does that live?
Well, so Azure is it's like AWS or Google's cloud platform. So it's hosted by Microsoft. So it's a cloud. It's the cloud version of their products.
But the AD. So I don't understand where the AD. So like if you stand up one of the like a Microsoft VM, you just get AD. Is that? Can you explain a little background to that? Because this is not a thing I understand. So
got it. Yeah. So I don't know what the from an infrastructure standpoint exactly what this looks like, but you're not actually standing up a VM. You're standing up a directory. So you're saying create a new directory within Azure, but you're not creating a server. So it's a little different in that it's in that they're basically taking care of whatever it takes to stand that up. And then you can actually interact directly with it via APIs and whatnot. So they're taking on some of that hosting role.
Interesting. So you're not in charge of the OS or any of the underlying services. It truly is this service, software as a service.
Yep, that appears to be the case. So let me turn cameras off, and I've got sharing on.
Which would indicate it probably goes on a shared server somewhere.
Probably, it's who knows what it actually looks like on the Microsoft side.
Yeah.
It probably is some kind of
server. It's like the mystery of
my
my own personal website. I don't know. Like I can FTP to it.
Yeah, exactly. So here's what I've got. I'm just going to start by going back to our app last week. Getting a little ahead of myself here. We're not supposed to actually have Azure up yet. Let's see, 1.5. We'll see if my instance is asleep. Actually, it shouldn't be because I've been in here today. And if everyone recalls, there was we had created a UI action, and this is all a little sluggish today. Pull up the event table. We created this UI action on the event table, and then what we were doing was we had this thing to generate an Outlook event. And when we were clicking this was failing. This was not actually going out there and making the API call that we wanted it to. So after last week's session, somebody actually mentioned me on Twitter and said, "Hey, I tried it without doing any conversion, and it seemed to work." And so it sounded like there might have been some kind of automatic processing by Microsoft of that. And so I haven't tried this. I got rid of the moment code that we were using last week, and basically at this point we just want to see if we can send this thing off.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do. I've set a breakpoint. We're going to open our debugger preemptively, and we're going to try it. And let me get back. There we go. So we're going to generate the Outlook event, and it should give me a pop-up saying there's a breakpoint. I feel like, is it somewhere on my other screen? It's sitting there.
Where's your script debugger?
See if I can find it. Oh, it's over here. Okay. So there we go.
Just today on the community, I had to explain to somebody like that was interested how to use it. It's one of those things that I guess I forget that like it's not ubiquitous that every single person knows how to invoke this. So
yeah, that's actually
debugger.
a really good point. Yeah. And we got there by opening this little bug icon.
Yep.
So
you can also get there from the application navigator on the left side. But
Enter
once that
Studio,
thing is
if I'm
open,
not mistaken.
Probably so. Yes.
We don't seem to be hitting the breakpoint.
Is it async?
I wonder.
It's
I think I know
UI
what's
action.
going on. No, I know what's happening. So what's happening, I'm pretty sure here, is that I've got. Is it actually in here? No, it doesn't appear to be. It hasn't stopped. It says execution paused. Do I need to refresh it? All right. We're going to try this one more time. And actually, let me see if I can get some junk off of this desktop over here and make it a little bit easier to go back and forth between what we're doing. There we go. So it is paused now. And the issue that I'm running into is before we go on to these live coding things, I turn on Do Not Disturb mode in Mac OS, and that suppresses the notification. So usually there's a little thing that pops up and we can see it. So that's the issue. So we're going to step over, and we're going to get a response from the API, and then we're going to step one more time so we can get a response body, and we can take a look at it. Now, last week when we were getting to this point, it was just not even executing the API call. It was just immediately failing. This time, we're actually getting a thing back that says...
Failed to validate some properties.
Yeah, fails some property validation. So that to me makes it seem like we still have an issue. But what I wanted to see here, so we know we can't use the date directly. But if we go back to what we were doing, let me just get rid of it.
Is it a date format thing, Josh? What do you suspect is the issue there?
Yeah, I do suspect it's date format. So what we were working on last week, and I'm gonna basically bring this back in, is we said that start time is moment dot format. And so basically we're using moment.js to handle this formatting for us. And then end time, actually that was end. Oh, these things are reversed, so that's an issue.
That could be the validation that it's failing.
Yeah, one is they're one's before the other, the wrong way.
Actually, before you do anything with moment, let's just do that.
Yeah, that could be it. That could be exactly it, because
one variable at a time.
Usually it's the simple things, and it would not surprise me if that is all that it was. And then we can move on and do scary stuff with Azure. All right, so let's just let that thing complete, and then we'll go back.
There's value in this. There's value in debugging.
Oh, there is absolutely value. Absolutely. So let's get the debug window back. And it didn't pause.
Pause.
Oh, I know why. It is because the breakpoint is no
It's not a
longer in the
comment.
right place.
Why don't you just go ahead and break on response, or break on
I thought
HTTP
that's-
status, because you're just going to fast forward
Yeah,
to it
that's
anyway.
true.
That's fair. Might as well.
Why can't you break out a comment? Come on.
I mean, yeah, I'm just not going to dignify that. All right. So we've got a response. Oh, this is looking actually better. So I think that was it. Yeah, that was it. So the
Nice
issue
stuff.
wasn't the
Oh,
date formatting. It wasn't the.
Everything we pursued for like the last half hour last week was a red herring. It was
Yep.
entirely the fact that the dates were backwards, and that's why it was failing to validate.
And you
here
wouldn't
it
have
is.
known it had you not tried to pull that variable out.
True. Yeah. And that's very, very true. Subtle stuff. So anyway.
I've caught so many bugs by just sticking in some debug statements and go, wait, oh, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
That and the act of trying to explain to somebody else
Yes, in an email. You start typing it out and you go, oh, I see it.
before you even finish explaining to them, you have figured it out, because the act of explaining it is actually what forces the scrutiny.
Yeah. Well, and on that, we've talked about sort of a switch in approach from putting lots and lots of debug statements to be able to use a script debugger. But really, I think the reality is somewhere in the middle, because particularly when you're doing a lot of processing, or if you're processing loops and you're going through lots of data, some of the time you just still want that debug output, and you want to be able to see a big splat of everything that's going on, and that's maybe a little bit more practical at times than the debugger. So got to find the happy
let's
medium.
actually talk about that, because in some of my apps, Travel Tracker is one. I do have there's a certain amount of like ambient debugging I want happening all the time. Particularly, it's a thing where automatic processes are happening, where I'm not going to be able to debug them anyway because they're async to me, right? So, there's now basically what it does is it elevates the threshold of what's worth a debug statement to something that's going to be of kind of durable value to you, not like a tactical solve this problem thing.
Well, you've got a couple of levels too. I mean, you can have debugging, you can have info, so they can be splattered throughout your script, and then you just use the scoped properties and say, this is the level I want to see today.
Yeah, and then you could actually, you could really think it through to the fact of if there's something that would be of value in production, you would make that info, right?
Right.
And there's something of only value to you as the developer, then you make it debug. And so you might actually be building like ongoing messaging that you would want a production server to be seeing.
Yeah, or turn it off completely. I don't want any of this to be turned on at the moment, but if somebody reports something, I'll turn on flip the property, turn it on. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, cool. Well,
that's one of the first things I do whenever I make a new scoped app. If it's a complete app, I'll throw in those two properties and say, I know I'm going to need them sooner or later.
Yeah, it's a good practice. So with that, we will move to Azure, or Azure, or how do you pronounce this thing? Is it Azure?
It's the name of a color. It's a bluish color. It's actually
I know it's
the
a
color
bluish
of the
color. It's just a weird. It's just a weird word, but anyway.
Azure Seas.
Right. So we've got here this. So basically, what I did, if you're following along, you actually want to do this on your own. I actually have this hooked up to a personal email address, and Azure has a free tier. You can go out there and you can sign up for, similar to if you're doing Google Cloud or if you're doing AWS, you can play around with stuff. And there is a free tier for AD. And what's interesting with this is that not every piece of functionality is available in the free tier. So we're going to find out in just a minute if I need to start a real free trial to do what we're trying to do, because I don't know. So we'll find out. But I've got a directory. I created this directory. I've got one user, and that user is me. And so if I go in here, there's this user, and basically I've got some profiles and whatnot. And so my goal is to, if we can get there by the end of this, be creating users using the Azure AD plugin on the ServiceNow side. So we'll create Chuck and we'll create Dave, and we'll see if we can actually get those to come over. So that is the idea. Now, what I did before is I did a little bit of prep work, not much, but I just activated orchestration, and I basically made sure that we had the plugins available to us. And from this point forward, we are now in completely uncharted territory. So let me pull up docs, because I do want to get as much information as I can available to us. And so we're going to look for Azure AD. And there should be a section on here for the Azure AD Activity Pack, and there it is. Let's go for the Jakarta version, because that's what I'm on. And
did you previously activate that plugin on your personal developer instance?
I did before. Yeah, I activated that before we started, and that will be necessary. You will have to activate that, and I believe because it's orchestration, you're going to have to activate it through the developer portal. You can't directly activate it on your PDI because it's not visible. So you're going to have to go to developer.servicenow.com and go to manage, and then you can actually activate the plugin from there.
Is that why you're currently logged in as a mate account?
Probably. And yeah, we'll just ignore that.
Pay no attention.
Nobody would have known. Anyway, so these are the various activities, and this is the key here. So the Azure AD activities were created with the Orchestration REST Web Service Activity template. Then if you look at one of these, actually, let me just go for the one we want. We want to create user. Come on. There we go. And so we want to create a user, and this important note, the REST message used must be configured to use OAuth authentication. So
your friend and mine.
I feel occasionally like this is OAuth coding happy hour. But we might have to get into OAuth again today a little bit, at least to get this configured, but we'll see. So I think what probably makes the most sense is I'm just going to create a workflow and try to start incorporating this and see what happens. And we'll start to configure stuff as we run into issues. So let's see. Open up workflow editor. I guess I can create a workflow on the... I'll just create a workflow on the user table. That seems easy enough to do. And
so is the objective to create in ServiceNow and see it show up in AD, or the other way around?
This would be the other way around. So yeah, in this case, this is all about interacting with and influencing Active Directory. Versus an integration, if we wanted to get stuff from AD, we'd probably do an import, more of like an LDAP thing.
Gotcha.
From that directory.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. So we'll just call this LCHH workflow.
Good name.
LCHH create user. How's that? And
better name.
Put this on the user table.
It's about 2/3 of the way down.
There we go. Is it not?
Well, now that you type sysuser, I don't know where it is.
So the trick is, if you type the brackets, it will.
I didn't know that. I like that trick.
Yeah, that is a good tip. So let's submit this.
I'm done. I learned something today.
Put that in the notes. Note the time of the broadcast.
That'll be our next Tech Now quick tip.
Type the bracket. So, and then if we go to, I think it's under, is it under packs? Or is it under custom? We'll find out. So we've got ServiceNow. This is how little I know about orchestration. I don't even know where these things are going to show up. So it is under packs. It's under ServiceNow, and then it's under Azure AD, and then we've got the various things here. So let's just drag create user out. We'll take a look at that. So create user. We've got interesting. So this is all very interesting. We've got a bunch of fields to fill in. I'm guessing, so these can be, so the field only allows to pass in password 2 type. All right, so we should be able to pass variables into these, I think, but I'm just gonna test user principal name. Is that like?
I think that's like the is that the SAM account name?
I think so. I don't know.
What we would call the login.
I'm just gonna fill everything out. And
it's been a long time since I did any AD administration.
Yeah.
I think for me that would be infinity since I've done that.
Divide by 0.
I don't know. I know so little about AD, honestly.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, which is what is going to make this really interesting. So, and then the OAuth profile. So this is important because I believe what happens is this. I think you can have multiple OAuth profiles set up for different AD configurations. And okay, that's interesting. Your activity requires an encrypted input. You must pass a password to variable.
Casey on YouTube is saying that the user principal name is more of an email address, user@domain.com.
Oh, okay.
Just copy the mail nickname.
Got it. I mean, we're going to probably violate all kinds of best practices when it comes
I'm
to
sure
today. But that is good to know. So try defining a workflow input as a password to type and pass it into the activity. So that's a pretty helpful error message. So I need to define a workflow input. I don't think I've ever done that. So let's do that next. Let's see. It's password 2.
That'll probably be in the data tab is what I'm guessing.
So the data tab, I believe, is going to be
flow inputs.
Well, so that's going to show us the inputs that are there.
Oh, okay.
I think we have to actually go to workflow properties. I think. We'll see. Inputs. There we go.
There's one.
And so we'll create an input. Can optionally be started with input parameters. That's pretty interesting. So we'll say this is a password 2.
Can you tell we don't visit this tab very often?
How about ever? I have literally never seen this tab in my life. But that's because I don't do a lot with workflow.
Someone out there's laughing.
All right.
Well, that is the nature of the platform. There's so much stuff across so many.
Nobody knows everything.
Nobody knows everything. And you can get 2 people well-versed in ServiceNow that have little, like just a minority of overlap of domain expertise. It's
Absolutely.
Can be kind of amazing.
Yeah, it really is. So the other thing I think I need to do is if I actually want to I can rejoin it. There we go. There we go. We should be back.
We're back.
Oh, all right. Note to myself: let's go edit that 3 minutes out of the thing when it's done.
Yeah. Now that we know how to use those YouTube editing functionality, so sorry about that. We are back. Skype crashed, and Skype is now back. So I'm not exactly sure where things died, but we were basically just trying to kick off this workflow. And in so doing, we realized that the password variable is read-only. So that's what I'm going to look at next. So I don't know, Chuck or Dave, have you ever done inputs?
No.
Or anybody watching?
Yeah,
I've seen it done once.
Let's go ahead and get what. Can you give it a default value and let's see if there's if we see anything in there.
Yeah, or set up a second input of a string and see what it behaves like. We won't use it, but we can always create it.
Fair enough. So we put the default value. It's empty. Let's try adding another one. It could be, no, I don't know what that would be. So let's add another.
Yeah, let's eliminate the passwordiness as a variable. Just make it a string or an integer or something.
So we've got test one. And we'll kick this off again. I will say that even though everything stopped working there, okay, so we've got input. So there is something with the password field, which makes me wonder if do we have to somehow programmatically pass something into that? So if I try starting this, well, starting this isn't really going to matter.
So the screen, the screen is frozen, but I guess they're hearing us, but the screen is frozen. So this is probably some more VM issues, I'm going to guess. I don't know.
That could be, because I'm looking right now at the VM and I see the screen on the VM.
Okay, and it just caught up. So
okay.
Jace is saying that workflow.input.your field name here, if we're going to script this.
Okay.
Right, but what we don't understand is why the UI control when we're playing it is
and
not.
I didn't see any scripting capability on the activity. Did you?
No. So the activity itself, you just basically passing things in. Now, one thing I guess
but you could put workflow.input. Whatever it is here.
Or could I do? Because if we pass in a user record, can I do current
that password?
Like this? Yeah, is it password or is it? I think it's user underscore password. There we go. And now I need to change the table so that we're actually looking at the sysuser table again. It's entirely possible, by the way, that it's actually maybe it's my connection that's not sending out. But anyway. All right, so we'll change this to sysuser.
Chase is saying user password isn't password 2 if he recalls correctly.
Is not password 2?
I don't actually even know what password 2 is. So
oh yeah, so I think I know what's happening. So basically, if I recall this correctly, password 1 is one-way hashing. So you basically take a password and spit out a hash. Password 2 is actually decryptable, meaning that, which would make sense because
yes, I'm verifying that right now in the Sys dictionary. Password is password one-way encrypted.
Got it. So, so I guess, for the sake of what we're doing today, what we could do is go into the sysuser table.
Change
create
the
a password
type.
2 field.
Oh, okay.
Can we not make the input to the workflow just a string and then deal with it in script?
Well, we can try. The problem with it was when I had something else there.
You had plain text, and it went, you're not going to use that today.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Maybe we'll just see what happens. We'll try this. So because I think the more interesting thing is the next part, which is actually trying to get this REST message configured. Because so what happens is orchestration is set up to do all this stuff. We've got all these activities, but these activities are just making API calls, and that has to get configured before any of this will work. So so that's kind of the next thing. So let me do this. Go to REST message. And you'll see this section called activity dependencies. So there's actually a thing in orchestration for activity dependencies, and there's all these Azure AD REST messages now. So here's this user management one, and it looks like this. Yeah, this is where we've got some stuff to do. So right off the bat, we see it says my organization. So also, let me just take a step back for a moment. So this endpoint is interesting. If you look at, let me pull this in from another screen. I've got some documentation that I want to bring up. Is it here? Bear with me. There we go. So there's this. No, that's not it. A second. I've got so much documentation up. Let's just do this. Azure AD Graph API. Yeah, this is how I found this documentation. So if you look at this, there's this thing, this quick start for the Azure AD Graph API, and the Graph API we were working with last week actually replaces this Graph API. And so it is, by the way, possible if basically to do everything we're doing with the Graph API, but the activity pack was created before the one Graph API to rule them all had been created, and so we were still actually pointing to the Azure AD specific one. So what we have to do is we have to get our tenant identifier, which I think is this. It's probably Nerius Gmail. We'll see. And we need to edit this. So I'm going to change my app because we actually have to make modifications. It's Azure, there we go, Azure AD. And I'm just going to say Nerius Gmail. I think that'll do it. Then we've got OAuth configuration to do. And it looks like I have to change all of these activities as well. So go in here. Just do that really quick. So we've got that hooked up, and now if I mean, this is going to fail, but if I click get OAuth token, it's going to go out there, and it's going to say unknown host exception because it's not configured. So if we look at the OAuth profile, this does ship with an OAuth profile already, and it looks like there are no scopes defined, so maybe we don't need them. We'll find out. Enter client ID, so we actually have to find, it looks like we have to find a client ID. It looks like we probably have to find a client secret and a token URL. So we're back to OAuth again. And I guess we'll tackle that. So do you have anything in here about authentication? Obtain access token. So to access Azure AD Graph, clients are required to successfully authenticate. More information, see authentication scenarios. So we'll look at that. Basics of authentication. I'm just going to look for client ID. See if we can figure out how to actually register this thing.
I'll tell a story while Josh is looking at that. Earlier today, we were on a call talking about that developer survey that some of you may have taken, and we were kind of looking at the stats from that. And OAuth was one of the things that we talked to, that was one of the things that was specifically asked about. And it was something like 8% of the people on average, it was a little different. I think we can share this information. Like 8% of the people said they felt proficient with OAuth. And I had a joke that I didn't use on our call, which was, that sounds about right, because I think 8% of this call is probably proficient with OAuth, meaning just Josh.
That'd be 30%.
That's funny.
No,
well,
I'm saying the call earlier today. So we had 14 people on. I was like, all right, probably 7% of this call is proficient with OAuth. So
that is funny. Well, and it's interesting because it just becomes more and more. I mean, we just see it more and more places. So actually, I think this might be a good place to start, because there's this article about creating a native client that talks to the Azure AD Graph API, and this has some examples of steps to do. So I'm just going to follow these steps, and we're going to see how far we get. So we're going to go to the Azure portal, and then app registration. So under Azure Active Directory app registrations, we have to register 2 apps. So this is the part that I was a little worried about. So let's go. Here it is, app registrations. So new application. We'll call this LCHH. No, that's not the one. Where's the? Here we go. Let me just move that over here, so it's a little easier for me to switch back and forth. And so add, so console app. It's going to be a native app. Localhost is a redirectory, right? Okay, fine. Native. I'm going to call this orchestration. And local. Which it's worth noting that this is very different than some of the application registrations that we've gone through before, which were sort of for applications that might be consumed by third parties, where this is very specific to this directory, which is a very different thing. So, so now we have an application ID, and let's see what they say we need to do with it. So you should see your list. Let's go required permissions. Under enable permissions, select access the directory as the signed in user. Okay. So required permissions. Add.
One of my takeaways from this has got to be, I have got to like buy myself a day somewhere to sit down and just work with OAuth, because I really, every time you do OAuth stuff, I still feel like I am barely hanging on by the skin of my teeth, or not even that.
Got to keep referencing the old videos.
So I've got to get myself up to speed understanding OAuth better, because I basically can't. I'm kind of in a position where you're my resource. I don't know anything about it. When in doubt, I raised a red flag and call you in.
I mean, it is one of those things. I think after you've probably done it once or twice, then it will start to feel better. When I'm okay, so you'll now see Windows Azure Active Directory. Is that okay? I have to click on that. There we go. This is not at all confusing. So select this under enabled permissions. Select access the directory as a signed in user. So where is enable permissions?
So you're configuring your Azure account that you stood up for yourself. Is that what you're doing here?
Yeah, effectively. Well, so basically this is it's allowing an application to access the directory. So by default, you couldn't just start logging in with my credentials. Like we have to set up a bunch of configurations first to say that users actually have it. Because otherwise,
is this similar to what we did with like the scope on Google?
It's a little similar. The difference is with the stuff on Google, when we were setting up the application, we're actually asking for the scopes in the OAuth flow. Whereas on this side, we're just saying, well, when you actually log in, it might just be taking a while.
Okay, we're back.
Okay, cool. So we'll keep going. And man, we've been so stable. Chuck, I blame you because you're back. You're using too much bandwidth.
I'll take credit for that.
Anyway, without anything else to go on, that's what I'm just going to do. So
That's why I blame the cats every time something goes missing. It's easier.
all right. So here's where this gets really interesting. So update the values of client ID and secret with the application ID. Update the tenant name to represent your tenant name. Update the tenant ID. So the tenant ID, we're going to have to copy and paste this value and then insert my Nerius Gmail in there. So we'll say Nerius Gmail. And then, okay, there we go. I'm going to have to revoke all this later because I have no idea how sensitive any of these values are.
Well, even given all of that, they still have to have an account to authenticate to, right?
Yeah, they would. So the tenant ID is a GUID that is part of the STS URL returned in the first XML node's STS URL. So entity descriptor. And oh, here it is, entity ID. All right, so we'll copy and paste that. I feel like there should be a utility for this that just says, here's all the stuff you need.
Import it. Yeah. We still need like the token URL.
Oh, wait, that was the tenant ID. Was that what I got? That's the entity ID. Or is it just the ID value? Is that what it said? It is a GUID that is part of the STS URL returned in the first XML node's STS URL. So descriptor. Maybe it's this. Yeah, this is a GUID.
Yeah,
so
and it's the entity ID, which is what they said. Yep.
Well, they didn't say it was the entity ID. They just said it was part of that thing. They should have just said it was the entity ID. But anyway, I'm not going to worry about that.
I'm not casting dispersions.
So that is the tenant ID, not the entity ID. And then we've got tenant name, and it's Nerius Gmail. So we're just collecting data. So are we close? I think we're close. So now we want to run the console app in app mode. Logging up Microsoft Online, tenant ID, OAuth 2, authorize. So this is what we need for the, I guess for the authorization URL. So, because this is set up as client credentials, which means that it's just getting a token. And if it's just getting a token, I don't know where that token URL is from. Do they say, let's see, Azure AD Graph API token URL. All right. For more narration, OAuth 2 and Azure AD. We warned everybody before we started that this was going to get weird.
Here there be dragons.
So OAuth 2 authorization flow. And we don't want to get an authorization code. We want to get a token. So we want the token section. And all
right, so just as a time check, it's 5:25. So do we want to hold up here? Do we want to plow through? Do we want to get this token? Are we close enough to a success point that we think we can have a thank you, good night moment, or are we potentially far from it?
We're either very close or we're very far, and I think we'll know. I think we'll know in a second, because
Yeah, no in between on that.
there really is none. Because if this thing works, then we're rolling, and if it doesn't work, I have no earthly idea.
Go back to the R&D mode.
Yeah, so there's going to be some.
Okay, so tell you what, we'll try to hit it
Downtime.
And then it will be what it is, and we'll stop here one way or the other. How about that?
Yep, that sounds good.
The only question is, are we ending on success or failure?
That is exactly true. So this is the tenant. I'm going to assume tenant means tenant name, but
that's what I'm thinking. Yep.
Nerius Gmail. So OAuth token. All right, we'll save that. I don't remember or did this even say where the tenant ID came into play? All right, well, let's just try hitting it. Let's go to REST messages. I think we fill this all out. I fill it out with everything that it said. So we'll go to user management, and we'll try to get a token.
And
will it think? Oh, come on, please.
So it's telling you not available underneath. Is that because it hasn't gotten it yet?
Yeah, that's because it hasn't gotten it yet. What I don't know.
So the tenant
J Nerius Gmail not found.
So that's not the right tenant ID.
Well, it might not be, but it also says this may happen if there are no active subscriptions for the tenant.
Oh,
I think we're back to AD configuration.
Yep. Check with your subscription administrator.
Yeah, well, I think and I think part of the problem is. So let me do one other thing. I'll try the tenant ID just to see. So it's going to be under OAuth. And if this doesn't work, then I probably have to have more than a free tier account to be able to actually call it. And that was kind of my fear starting out. So we'll copy this, and we will replace that.
A worthy hypothesis.
And go back here, get a token.
Fingers crossed. Nope. Error validating credentials. Invalid client.
Invalid
so
client.
What that
different message.
That implies to me that is in fact the correct.
Yeah.
Because you moved it forward to the client secret being the problem.
Yeah. So that actually makes me really happy, because I think that means we are actually close to success. And at this point, there was a lot of text in that document, and I think there was a section. This does absolutely go back to configuration over here. There was a section that talked about creating. I probably have to create a key, and use that key. Is what I'm guessing, but that sounds like a good thing to pick up with next time.
Which may not be next week, but just next time we address this.
Next time we get back to Azure AD.
So just for administrative, whether you're watching this live or you're watching this later on, we I guess starting last week, it's always been kind of implicit, but we really kind of explicitly were making a call for topics that people want to see. So if there's ever a thing you want to see one of these Fridays, then let us know, and we absolutely are keeping track of that, and we'll pick accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna shut off the sharing and turn on the cameras.
I'm gonna turn mine back on. Boop. There we go.
All right, I think we're back.
All right, so that was about what we expected, right? We didn't necessarily have an expectation that we were going to get something working. In fact, that's why the disclaimer. So, getting to the point where we saw the error, you got past the error, we have a good feeling that now you've done pretty much everything we can do on the ServiceNow side without getting back to that AD configuration that you were worried about.
Yep, absolutely. And I think, the thing we did learn was that if you're going down the path of trying to use Azure AD, that whole orchestration pack, thing number one is not necessarily to Not necessarily to try to just use it. There's some configuration, so you have to go and you have to modify the REST messages, and you've got to go and you've got to modify this OAuth 2 endpoint. I think modifying the REST messages is even more important, because if you just left those things, you get all the OAuth 2 stuff working, and then the REST messages just aren't going to work because they don't go to the right endpoint. So, so if nothing else, we've learned, we've gotten some interesting information out of this, and we'll pick it up another time.
It almost, the way it's comes configured out of the box almost is misleading. It would maybe make more sense to have all that stuff empty, because like right now it's populated, but it's populated with stuff that will never work, right?
Yeah, and the other thing I would like to see, and this is passing no judgment on anybody who wrote that, because things are written in certain ways for certain reasons, but if there were maybe system properties or some way of saying, because technically you could extract all of that into system properties and have some kind of a properties page and say, here's all your Azure AD information. The one thing I guess is interesting about it is by forcing you to change it, it almost implies that this is just a starter. Like, this is just to get you started, and there's probably going to be some tweaking that you have to do along the way. And if you wanted to do more than just those, whatever, 6 operations or whatever those were, you're going to have to do some additional work. And so I guess maybe it's better to look at it as a starter pack than anything else.
Look at it the way like a out of the box service portal widget is, right? It's a place to begin, but not what you're going to deploy.
Yeah, I think that seems fair. So,
okay.
Anyhow, yeah, this is interesting. It is uncomfortable and weird as it sometimes is, just flailing around. It's fun to learn things. So.
Well, and we've talked about many times, right? It's definitely like doing this is not for everybody, because you have to be willing to expose not knowing stuff, which we have grown very comfortable with. We've grown very comfortable with things not working and admitting that we don't know things, right? Which is not, like, as a young engineer, have I told this story? Like, as a young engineer, I worked so hard to conceal what I didn't know. And now if I'm in a meeting and I don't understand something, I assume it's your problem in communicating to me, right? It's like, you're not making me understand. Keep going till I understand. It's like an old engineer, young engineer thing. So anyway.
And I'm somewhere in the middle.
All right. Let's get the ratings. Chuck, where you at on your rogue? So let's give you the theoretical one and the concrete one. Like,
what's that mean?
So your idea of the beer, and then your one particular year-old beer. That's what I did with mine. With my liquid bliss.
I forgot this was 6.8, so it's gotten better as I've gone along.
Okay. So what's your rating for the one in your hand?
I'm giving this a solid 4 1/4.
Wow, that's
high
good praise for an ancient model.
It might have added fermentation while I was waiting.
All right, Josh.
So the Oktoberfest, and it really is. It's like ACH Toberfest from Miskatonic. It's a solid 4 1/4. This is it's really smooth and it's really boozy. I think it's like a 6.9% as well. So drinking the Scotch ale today.
You should give one of those to Darren Ackman. That's how he spells his last name, right?
I'll have to let him know.
I'm coming in the lowest with 5.7. This Sam Adams, I'm going to give it like a 4.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
nice.
Honestly, the pumpkin, I would probably, like, in about a month would be a little more to my palate, but it's fine. I'm not kind of going pumpkin crazy. Somehow, like this time of year, the fact that you can get something flavored pumpkin is everyone's losing their mind. Krispy Kreme has pumpkin donuts.
No.
And Starbucks has a thing.
The only thing I go for is pumpkin pie. That's it. That's where it is.
So
anyway,
that.
4.0. So there you go. Sorry for the VM problems. I think we're going to try to tighten this up. Not sure how much of this is the update. We had some pending updates and some IT stuff. So we'll try to get the stack better. We'll try to next week try to be back on Twitch. So we were rapidly going down the hierarchy of need into just pure survival. It's like, all right, let's get anything working, and next week we'll do the better thing. So,
Chuck's
all right. Welcome back, Chuck.
Thanks.
And thanks everybody for watching, and we will catch you again next time. See
Bye.
y'all.
Bye.